She helped him fix his car, not knowing he'd change her life forever. The last streaks of daylight were fading behind the mountains when the silver-gray Aston Martin coughed once and died. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through miles of golden-brown fields now turning gray beneath the lowering sky. A bitter wind swept through, carrying the scent of damp earth and rain that hadn't yet fallen. Ethan Hale gripped the steering wheel, jaw tight, staring at the dashboard that flashed stubbornly red. Engine failure. Battery dead. Just perfect. Unbelievable, he muttered, pressing the ignition again. Silence. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, exhaling a long, frustrated breath. For a man who built empires with precision and control, he suddenly found himself helpless, stranded on a deserted road halfway between nowhere and the next town. His phone screen glowed faintly, but the signal bar was empty. No service. He looked out at the empty horizon, the first raindrop splattering against the windshield, followed by another, and another. Within seconds, the sky opened up, rain hammering down like a curse he didn't deserve but had somehow earned. He stepped out, pulling his coat tighter. His polished shoes sank slightly into the wet gravel. The cold air bit at his face as he glanced around. No lights, no sound but rain and wind. Then, faintly, through the noise of the storm, a low rumble. Headlights appeared in the distance, flickering through sheets of rain, growing brighter until an old blue pickup truck rolled to a stop behind his car. The driver's door creaked open. Out stepped a woman, mid to late 20s, wearing worn jeans tucked into mud-streaked boots, a dark hoodie with the sleeves rolled up, and a baseball cap pulled low. Her hair, chestnut brown and messy from the rain, fell over her shoulder. "Need a hand?" she called out over the rain. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to being offered help, least of all from strangers. "The car's dead," he said shortly. "Won't start." She walked closer, her flashlight slicing through the rain. Her face came into view. Strong, gentle features, eyes the color of hazelnut and warmth, the kind of eyes that didn't flinch from anything. "Pop the hood," she said, not asking, instructing. He blinked, caught off guard by her tone. "Do you work with cars?" She smirked faintly, brushing water from her cheek. "I fix them for a living, yeah. Name's Claire. Claire Dawson." She stepped around him with the confidence of someone who didn't need permission, wiping her hands on a rag she pulled from her back pocket. "You're not from around here, are you?" Ethan gave a half-smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Is it that obvious?" She leaned under the hood, flashlight beam cutting through the drizzle. "The car kind of gives it away. You're about 20 miles outside Maple Ridge. Not exactly Aston Martin territory." Her hands moved deftly, checking cables and connections, brushing raindrops from the battery terminals. Ethan stood silently beside her, watching. Her fingers were calloused, her movements efficient and sure. "You do this often?" he asked, voice low. "Every day," she said. "People around here can't afford new cars, so they keep fixing old ones. Keeps me in business." There was pride in her tone, not complaint. "Why are you out here?" she asked after a pause, glancing up. He hesitated. "Meeting. Cancelled. Took a wrong turn." She tightened a bolt. "Looks like your alternator's struggling. These new models hate cold rain. Give me a second." Ethan found himself studying her, the small furrow between her brows, the faint smudge of oil on her cheek, the quiet focus. There was something grounding about her, something real. "Try it now," she said, stepping back. He slid behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth as silk. Relief flooded him. When he stepped out again, the rain had eased into a mist. She was wiping her hands with her rag, her cap dripping. "Thank you," he said, reaching for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Her expression softened, but she shook her head. "Nothing," he frowned. "Nothing? You just fixed my car." She met his eyes. "You looked like you needed help, not a bill." He blinked. "That's Not how the world usually works. Maybe not your world, she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. But around here we help because it's right, not because it pays. Her words hit something deep, something old. For years, Ethan's world had been contracts, deals, and masks. But this moment, felt disarmingly honest. I insist, he said, still holding out the cash. She smiled faintly. And I insist you keep it. Consider it a Christmas miracle. He didn't know whether to be annoyed or impressed. Probably both. At that, she turned toward her truck. You'll be fine now. Battery'll hold till morning. If not, there's a small garage in town. Mine. Claire's Auto Repair. She was about to climb into her pickup when he said, Wait, at least let me give you a ride back. It's raining. She hesitated, glancing at her truck, then at him. You offering because you want to or because your guilt won't let you rest? He chuckled softly. Maybe both. Her lips curved in a reluctant smile. All right, Mr. Hale, just to the edge of town. He froze slightly. You know who I am? She shrugged, climbing into the passenger seat. Hard not to. Your company's name is on half the electronics in my shop. He got in, amused despite himself. So much for anonymity. Don't worry, she said, buckling up. Your secret's safe with the grease-stained mechanic from nowhere. The rain drummed lightly as they drove. For a long time, neither spoke. The road twisted through forests, shadows flickering past the headlights. She smelled faintly of motor oil and vanilla, an oddly comforting mix. Eventually, she broke the silence. You look like someone who hasn't smiled in a while. He glanced at her, surprised. That obvious? She gave a soft laugh. You wear it like armor. He didn't answer, but something in him stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. When they reached the small town, the lights of Claire's Auto Repair glowed dimly beneath a hand-painted sign. Above it, a small apartment window was lit from within, curtains drawn. She pointed. Home sweet home. He slowed to a stop. You live here? Yep, me and my boy. You have a son? Her eyes softened instantly. Noah, he's 9. Smartest kid I know. Built a mini windmill for his school fair last year. Beat every rich kid from the city schools. He smiled quietly. Sounds like he takes after his mom. She looked at him then. Really looked. And for a moment, something wordless passed between them. Thanks for the ride, she said finally, hand on the door. Thank you for the help, he replied. I owe you, she smiled faintly. You don't, just pay it forward. And with that, she stepped out, shutting the door softly behind her. Ethan sat there for a moment, watching her climb the steps to her apartment. A small light flicked on inside. A shadow, a small boy's, darted across the curtain, and she ruffled his hair, laughing softly. He didn't know why, but the sound of that laughter stayed with him long after he drove away into the mist. Because for the first time in years, Ethan Hale had met someone who didn't want his money, his power, or his name. She just wanted him to be human, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. Ethan Hale didn't sleep that night. He had returned to his penthouse. Glass walls, sleek furniture, the kind of silence that echoed, yet everything felt hollow. The rain tapped softly against the windows, but all he could hear was her voice. We help because it's right, not because it pays. It was strange. He had built a life on logic, numbers, and control. Everything had a cost. Every person a motive. Yet she, Claire Dawson, a small-town mechanic with rain in her hair and oil on her hands, had walked into his world for 20 minutes and left it spinning off its axis. He didn't know why he looked her up the next morning. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something deeper. By noon, his car was parked outside the same little garage with the hand-painted sign, Claire's Auto Repair. The place was alive with the sounds of tools clanking and an old radio humming a country tune. Through the open bay door, he saw her, bent over an engine, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back in a messy knot. A smear of grease streaked her cheek, and she was laughing at something a boy said. A small boy with sandy hair and bright eyes who was trying to hand her a wrench that was far too big for him. Ethan stood there quietly, watching. The sight was disarming in a way he couldn't name. "Mom, he's staring again," the boy said suddenly, his voice clear and teasing. Claire looked up sharply, blinking as she spotted him. "Mr. Hale?" she said, half surprised, half amused. "You're back already. Don't tell me that fancy car broke down again." He smiled faintly. "Not this time. I thought I'd check on that alternator. Make sure it was still behaving." She tilted her head, wiping her hands on a rag. "Or maybe you just missed my coffee. It's terrible, but strong." Her humor caught him off guard. "Maybe both," he admitted. The boy stepped forward, curious. "You're the man with the shiny car?" "That's me," Ethan said, crouching to the boy's level. "And you must be Noah." The boy grinned. "Mom said I shouldn't talk to strangers, but you don't look dangerous. Just rich." Ethan laughed quietly. "You're very observant." Claire shook her head. "He gets that from watching too many detective cartoons." "Or maybe from watching you," Ethan said before he could stop himself. The compliment hung in the air, soft but sincere. Claire blinked, color rising in her cheeks. "Coffee?" she asked quickly, changing the subject. He followed her inside the small office. It smelled of motor oil, coffee, and something faintly sweet. Cinnamon rolls, probably from the bakery across the street. The walls were lined with photos. Her and Noah, a younger version of her with a diploma, and a picture of the garage on the day it opened. "This your business?" he asked. "Every nut and bolt," she said proudly. "Started it 5 years ago after things went south. He didn't push. He could tell by her tone that things meant pain, loss, the kind that shaped people." "And Noah's dad?" he asked gently. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes dimmed. "Gone before he ever decided to stay." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." She shrugged, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. "Don't be. I stopped waiting for people to come back a long time ago." For a moment they stood in silence, the kind that felt strangely intimate, like two people who'd both learned the same hard lessons from life but never said them aloud. After a while, Ethan asked, "You ever think about expanding? Maybe opening a second garage in town?" She laughed softly. "You think I've got the money for that?" "I think you've got the skill for it," he said simply. Her eyes flicked to him, searching, cautious. "You offering me a job, Mr. CEO?" He smiled. "Maybe a partnership. You bring the skill, I bring the investment." She crossed her arms. "You don't even know me." "Maybe I'd like to." That silence between them deepened, heavier this time. Not uncomfortable, but charged with something that made her heartbeat stutter. She quickly looked away, taking a sip of coffee that had long gone cold. Before she could reply, Noah burst in, holding a small model car. "Mr. Hale, look! I made this from scrap metal." Ethan knelt beside him, inspecting it. The car was crude but clever. Wires twisted into shape, bottle caps for wheels. "You made this yourself?" Noah nodded proudly. "Mom helped me with the soldering. I want to build real cars someday." Ethan smiled genuinely. "You might just do that." Claire watched from the doorway, something soft in her chest she hadn't felt in years. It had been so long since a man had looked at her son with genuine warmth, not pity or indifference. Hours slipped by like minutes. Ethan helped around the garage, holding tools, talking with customers, even making Noah laugh with bad jokes. He looked different here, not like the man who lived in glossy boardrooms or sat behind tinted glass. He looked human, lighter, as if the weight he carried had finally found a place to rest. When the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the open doors, Claire leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You sure you don't have some billion-dollar meeting to rush to?" He smiled softly. "I canceled it." She raised a brow. "For this?" "For peace," he said. "Something I didn't realize I missed until now." Her eyes softened, but she didn't reply. Instead, she handed him a paper cup filled with hot cocoa. Noah's idea, she said. He took it, brushing her fingers lightly in the exchange. The touch was brief, but electric. That night, when he finally drove back to the city, the world outside looked different. The skyline wasn't cold steel anymore. The stars weren't so distant. Because somewhere in a little town garage, a woman and her son had reminded him what warmth felt like. Over the next few weeks, he found reasons to visit again. Car trouble, business opportunities, community outreach. Each excuse thinner than the last, and each time, Claire saw through him but never called him out. And every time he came, Noah's grin grew wider. Every time, the coffee tasted better. Every time, the silence between him and Claire grew a little more like something beautiful trying to bloom. Then came the night everything changed. It was late, snow beginning to fall, the roads quiet. Claire was closing up the garage when Ethan arrived, his coat dusted white. "You'll catch your death out there," she said, smiling as she unlocked the door for him. "Couldn't resist breaking something again?" He laughed softly. "Actually, I came to ask if you'd have dinner with me, both of you, tomorrow night." Her brows lifted. "Dinner? Why?" "Because it's Christmas Eve," he said quietly, "and no one should spend it alone." She hesitated, her heart wanting to say yes, her mind full of reasons to say no. "Ethan, we're not." He took a step closer, his voice gentle. "I'm not asking for anything, Claire. Just dinner. With you and Noah, let me thank you. Properly." Something in his eyes made her pause, the sincerity, the loneliness she recognized. Finally, she nodded. "If you show up in that fancy car, the neighbors will think I've started fixing millionaires instead of engines." He smiled, that rare, quiet smile that reached his eyes this time. Deal. That night, as Claire tucked Noah into bed, he looked up and asked, "Mom, do you think Mr. Hale's lonely?" She paused, brushing a hand through his hair. "Maybe. Why?" "Because he smiles like someone who forgot how, but wants to remember." Her throat tightened. "Yeah," she whispered softly. "Maybe he does." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the small town in silence. And somewhere across the city, Ethan stood by his window, staring out at the same snow, thinking of the mechanic with the kind eyes who had fixed far more than his car. She had started fixing his heart. Snow fell thick and slow the next evening, blanketing the small town in a hush that felt almost sacred. Lights shimmered faintly in every window, gold against the winter blue. And from somewhere down the street came the sound of carolers, voices soft and hopeful. Claire Dawson stood in front of her tiny mirror, smoothing down the fabric of a simple emerald green dress. It wasn't new. She'd bought it years ago for her sister's wedding. But tonight, somehow, it felt right. Noah was in the living room, bouncing with excitement, his hair still damp from his bath. He'd put on a little checkered shirt and jeans, proudly insisting he looked grown up enough for dinner with a rich man. Claire smiled, fastening her earrings. "He's not just a rich man, honey, he's Ethan." She didn't know when she'd started calling him that. Maybe after the third or fourth time he'd shown up with coffee and no reason at all. Maybe after he'd fixed the garage lights himself instead of calling an electrician. Or maybe after she caught him helping Noah with homework, listening so intently it made her heart ache. Whatever it was, Ethan Hale had slowly, quietly, become part of their small, fragile world. And tonight, she couldn't deny the nervous flutter in her chest. A knock sounded at the door. Noah ran ahead, nearly slipping on the rug as he swung it open. "He's here," he shouted. And there he was, Ethan, standing on the doorstep, snow in his hair and a warm smile that could have melted the whole street. He wasn't in a suit tonight. Instead, he wore a dark coat and a soft gray sweater that made him look almost human. Real. "Merry Christmas," he said gently, holding out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "For you both," Noah gasped. "Can I open it?" "After dinner," Claire said with a teasing smile, though she was just as curious. Inside, the little living room glowed with the yellow light of a single lamp. The Christmas tree, crooked but full of heart, stood in the corner, decorated with paper stars and old ornaments. Ethan looked around, his chest tightening. It was imperfect, but it was warm. It felt like Christmas, something he hadn't felt in years. Claire brought out dinner. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, and a pie she'd stayed up too late baking. It wasn't the kind of meal served in luxury restaurants, but to Ethan, it was the best thing he'd seen in a long, long time. "Careful," she said when he reached for a dish. "That plate's older than my garage. If you break it, you owe me a new one." He chuckled. "I'll try to be gentle. I've been told I'm not good at that." She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled softly. "I think you're learning." Dinner was filled with laughter, real laughter. Noah talked nonstop about school, cars, and the time he'd tried to make a go-kart out of lawnmower parts. Ethan listened, genuinely amused, offering little tips and stories of his own youth, which surprised even him. Claire watched them, her heart quietly swelling. The man she'd once seen as cold and unreachable was sitting at her small kitchen table, grinning like a boy, teasing her son, and wiping pie crumbs from his sweater. It was surreal. And beautiful. After dinner, Noah tore open the gift, a sleek model car kit, complete with paint, glue, and tiny parts. "Whoa," he breathed. "This is awesome." "There's one condition," Ethan said. "You have to let me help you build it." "Deal," Noah said instantly. When Noah ran off to show his creation to the neighbor kid, Claire and Ethan were finally alone. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was thick, charged, full of everything they hadn't said yet. "Thank you," she murmured, "for doing this, for him, for us." He looked at her, really looked. "You don't have to thank me, Claire. You've done more for me than you know." She frowned slightly. "Me?" He nodded, eyes soft. "You reminded me what people can be, what love can be." His voice trembled slightly at the word love, as though it was something fragile he hadn't dared touch in years. "I lost someone once," he continued quietly. "I thought I'd buried that part of me with her. The part that could feel anything. But then, one rainy night, a woman with grease on her hands told me she didn't need my money, just a little kindness. And somehow, she fixed something in me I didn't even realize was broken." Her breath caught. "Ethan." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I don't want to pretend anymore, Claire. Not to the world, not to myself. I want to be here, with you, with Noah. If you'll let me." For a moment, all she could hear was the ticking of the old clock and the faint hum of the heater. Tears pricked at her eyes. Tears she didn't expect. "You don't have to say that because you feel sorry for us." He shook his head, voice steady. "I've never been more certain of anything. You and Noah. You're what home feels like." She looked up at him. This man who had everything money could buy, standing in her modest kitchen as though it was the only place he wanted to be, and something inside her gave way. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing his. Then, "Stay," she whispered. He did. He leaned down, and when their lips met, it wasn't a movie kiss, it was soft, trembling, full of years of loneliness finally finding warmth. Outside, snow drifted silently past the window, and the little tree lights flickered like stars. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers and smiled. "Looks like you fixed another broken engine tonight." She laughed through her tears. "You're impossible." "Hopeless," he corrected. "Hopelessly yours." From down the hall came Noah's voice. "Mom! Mr. Hale, come see the car." And they both laughed, wiping their eyes before heading toward the living room. And that was how it began. Not with grand gestures or perfect moments, but with small, imperfect ones. Dinners in a small kitchen, laughter over cocoa, snow on the windows, and love that grew quietly like the dawn. In the end, Ethan Hale didn't just find the woman who helped fix his car. He found the woman who helped him rediscover his heart. And for Claire Dawson, the mechanic who thought she'd stopped believing in miracles, she realized that sometimes miracles arrive not with angels or light, but with a broken-down car, a stranger in need, and the courage to open your door. That Christmas night, as snow covered the world outside, 3 hearts found warmth inside a little garage family home, and for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly where it belonged.